She laughed at my $50,000 investment, calling me a bored housewife. But she did not know that money was just the transaction fee to trigger a hostile takeover of her father's empire. When he walked into the boardroom and saw me in the chairman's seat, he did not call me Mark's wife. He fell to his knees and whispered the name that makes Wall Street tremble. My name is Juliet Northcott. At 42 years old, I had perfected the art of disappearing while standing in the center of a crowded room, to the world, and more importantly to my husband Mark. I was the quintessential trophy wife. Though perhaps a trophy that had gathered a bit of dust on the shelf, I was the quiet, supportive shadow behind Mark, the rising star and chief executive officer of a booming construction firm in New York City. I was the woman who organized the dinner parties, who remembered the birthdays of his board members, and who nodded politely when the conversation turned to business, pretending that the jargon of profit margins and quarterly projections was a foreign language I struggled to comprehend. Mark loved this version of me. He loved the narrative that I was a gentle soul living off a modest, dwindling inheritance left by my late parents. To him, my financial contribution to our marriage was negligible, a cute little safety net that allowed me to buy organic groceries and indulge in flower arranging classes. He liked feeling like the provider, the titan, the man who brought home the kill while I kept the cave warm. He had no idea that the cave we lived in, and indeed the very ground he hunted on, were things I could purchase with a single phone call. But silence has a price, and tonight, the cost was becoming unbearable. We were at the Starlight Charity Gala, an event so thick with pretension that one could practically taste the desperation in the champagne. The ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was filled with the glitterati of New York, a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns. The air smelled of expensive perfume and old money mixed with the sharp, metallic scent of new ambition. Mark was in his element. He moved through the crowd with a shark-like grace, shaking hands, clapping shoulders, and laughing a little too loudly at jokes that were not funny. I drifted beside him, a ghost in silk, my hand resting lightly on the crook of his arm. Then I saw her. Brianna. She was standing near the ice sculpture, holding court with a group of junior investors. She was the director of sales at Skyline Luxury Group, a position she wore like a crown. She was young, perhaps 28 or 29, with the kind of aggressive beauty that demanded attention. Her dress was a screaming shade of red, cut low enough to be scandalous and high enough to be dangerous. She was everything I was supposedly not: vibrant, hungry, and loud. I felt Mark's arm tense beneath my hand. His eyes darted toward her, a reflex he could not control. It was not the look of a man seeing a business associate. It was the look of a man seeing something he possessed. I had known about the affair for 3 months. I knew about the late nights at the office that were actually spent in her downtown loft. I knew about the weekend trips to the Hamptons that were disguised as site inspections. I knew she called him Marcus when they were alone, a pretension that made my skin crawl. "Look, there is Brianna," Mark said, his voice feigning casual surprise. "We should go say hello. Skyline is a major potential partner for the Hudson Yards project." Before I could object, he was steering me toward her. Brianna saw us coming. Her smile widened, but it did not reach her eyes. Her eyes were cold, calculating scanners that assessed my worth and dismissed me in a nanosecond. "Mark," she exclaimed, extending a hand that lingered in his a fraction of a second too long. "I was hoping you would make it. The gala would be positively dreary without the industry's most dynamic CEO." "You flatter me, Brianna," Mark beamed, puffing out his chest. "You know my wife, Juliet." Brianna turned her gaze to me. It was like being examined by a biological specimen researcher. "Of course, Mrs. Northcott. It is so lovely to see you out of the house. Mark tells me you are quite the homebody." The insult was wrapped in velvet, but it was an insult nonetheless. She was painting me as a recluse, a boring matron who waited by the window for her husband to return. "I enjoy my privacy," I said softly, keeping my face impassive. "And please, call me Juliet." Juliet. She tested the name, tasting it. "Well, Juliet, I must say, that is a courageous choice of dress." She gestured with her champagne flute toward my gown. It was a midnight blue piece, structured and architectural, made of a rare silk blend that absorbed the light rather than reflecting it. There were no sequins, no crystals, no logos. It was a bespoke creation from a master tailor in Milan who only accepted 5 clients a year. It cost more than Brianna's car, but to the untrained eye, it was simply dark fabric. "Courageous?" I asked, tilting my head slightly. "Oh, do not get me wrong." She laughed, a tinkling, artificial sound. "It is very vintage, very safe. It reminds me of something my mother used to wear in the 90s. But I suppose when one is not in the corporate world, keeping up with trends is not a priority. In my line of work at Skyline, image is everything. If you are not on the cutting edge, you are bleeding out." She smoothed the front of her red dress, which was likely an off-the-rack piece from a high-end department store, flashy but lacking soul. I waited for Mark to step in. I waited for my husband to say that my dress was elegant, or that I looked beautiful, or simply to change the subject. Instead, he chuckled. "She has a point, honey," Mark said, looking at me with a pitying expression. "Brianna has an eye for these things. She closes million-dollar deals while looking like a runway model. Maybe you could take a few pointers from her, get out of your comfort zone a little." The air left my lungs. It was not the first time he had sided with her, but doing it here, in public, over something as trivial as a dress, felt like a slap in the face. He was not just cheating on me, he was devaluing me. He was stripping away my dignity to elevate his mistress. "I am comfortable with my style, Mark," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. Brianna smirked, sensing blood in the water. "Oh, do not be stubborn, Juliet. We women have to help each other. Right? I could introduce you to my stylist. She works wonders with older clients who need a refresh. Honestly, being a housewife must be so relaxing, but you do not want to let yourself go completely. Men like Mark need a woman who can keep pace with them." She leaned in closer to Mark, effectively boxing me out of the conversation. "Speaking of pace, Mark, I just secured the zoning permits for the East River complex. $50 million in projected revenue within the first quarter. I would love to walk you through the details. Maybe lunch next week." $50 million. Mark's eyes lit up with greed. "That is incredible, Brianna. You are a force of nature. Yes, lunch sounds perfect. I want to hear all about it." They fell into a rhythm of business banter, throwing around numbers and acronyms, deliberately excluding me. I stood there, clutching my clutch bag, watching the man I had vowed to love and cherish openly flirt with the woman who was destroying our marriage. They thought I was stupid. They thought I was a relic. They thought the $50 million Brianna was bragging about was an astronomical sum, a number that defined success. I excused myself, claiming a headache. Neither of them offered to accompany me to the door. As I walked away, I heard Brianna's laughter ringing in my ears, followed by Mark's low, appreciative murmur. The ride home in the town car was silent. Mark stayed behind, claiming he needed to network for another hour or two. I knew what that meant. He would be celebrating Brianna's zoning victory in a hotel room upstairs. When I arrived at our penthouse on the Upper East Side, I did not go to the bedroom to weep. I did not pour myself a glass of wine to drown the humiliation. I walked past the master suite, down the hallway, to the small, unassuming study at the back of the apartment. Mark called this my hobby room. He thought I used it to scrapbook and manage the household bills. I locked the door behind me. I sat down at the heavy oak desk and pulled a loose floorboard up from beneath the rug. From the hidden compartment, I retrieved a laptop. It was an old, battered machine, thick and heavy, with no logos on the lid. To an observer, it looked like a piece of junk from 10 years ago. In reality, it was a military-grade encrypted terminal with a direct satellite uplink, completely untraceable. I opened the lid. The screen flared to life, not with a Windows wallpaper, but with a black background and streams of neon green code. I typed in a 64-character password. The interfaces loaded. It was a dashboard that would have made the floor traders at the New York Stock Exchange hyperventilate. Real-time data streamed from Tokyo. London, and Hong Kong. I saw the fluctuating prices of gold, the yield curves of treasury bonds, and the leverage ratios of massive hedge funds. My eyes scanned the accounts. Mark thought I lived on a monthly allowance from a trust fund that generated perhaps $3,000 a month. On the screen, the total asset value under my direct management ticked upward. It was not in the millions, it was in the billions. I was not just Juliet Northcott, the housewife. I was the silent architect behind 3 of the largest venture capital firms in Silicon Valley. I was the majority shareholder of a shipping conglomerate in Greece. I was the shadow lender who had bailed out national banks during the last recession. My name did not appear on Forbes lists because I paid very expensive people to ensure it never did. Power, true power, does not need to scream. It operates in the dark. I navigated to a specific folder labeled Watch List. I typed in a new entry, Skyline Luxury Group. I pulled up their finances. Brianna bragged about a $50 million project. I looked at Skyline's debt structure. They were over-leveraged. Their liquidity was drying up. They were floating on a bubble of high-interest loans and arrogant optimism. I looked at the profile of Brianna's father, Thomas Sterling, the chairman. I knew him, not socially, but I knew his balance sheet. He was a gambler. He had bet the company's future on low interest rates that were about to rise. I sat back in my chair, the blue light of the screen reflecting in my eyes. The humiliation of the evening washed over me again, but this time, it did not sting. It fueled me. Brianna had called my investment small. She had mocked my dress. She had called me outdated. And Mark had looked at me with pity. They saw a housewife. They saw a victim. I typed a command into the terminal, initiating a background check on Skyline's debt holders. "You want to play the big game, Brianna," I whispered to the empty room. "You want to talk about $50 million like it is the world I spilled that much before breakfast. I could have destroyed them tonight. I could have bought their building and evicted them by morning. But that would be too easy. That would be mercy. And I was not feeling merciful. I wanted them to feel high. I wanted them to feel superior. I wanted Brianna to believe she had won the king and the kingdom. I wanted Mark to sign those divorce papers thinking he was discarding a burden. I would let them climb to the very top of their little tower. I would let them look down on me and laugh. And then, when they were dizzy with their own hubris, I would pull the foundation out from under them, brick by brick. I closed the laptop and slid it back into its hiding place. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the glittering skyline of Manhattan. Somewhere out there, Mark was likely with her. Let them have their night. Let them have their laughs. Tomorrow, I will pay a visit to Skyline Luxury Group. I would wear my outdated clothes. I would play the part of the naive, bored housewife looking for a small investment to occupy her time. I would offer them $50,000. And when they mocked me, when they took that money with a sneer, they would be signing their own death warrants. They did not know it yet, but the war had already begun, and in this war, I was not the wife. I was the apocalypse. The lobby of Skyline Luxury Group was designed to make you feel small. The ceilings were 30 feet high. The floors were polished marble that reflected your insecurities. And the reception desk was a slab of black granite manned by a woman who looked more like a runway model than an administrative assistant. I walked in clutching my handbag, wearing a beige cardigan that Brianna would likely describe as suburban camouflage. I had an appointment. I had made it under my maiden name, though I doubted the system would flag it. To them, I was just a random lead, a nobody with a checkbook. When I finally reached the 42nd floor, Brianna was waiting. She did not stand up from her desk. She was seated in a white leather chair that looked like a throne. Surrounded by glass walls that offered a panoramic view of the empire she thought she ruled. She was on the phone, laughing loudly, twirling a strand of her blonde hair. She saw me standing in the doorway, made eye contact, and then deliberately turned her chair away to finish her conversation. It was a power move, the kind you learn in Business 101 for bullies. I waited for 5 minutes, then 10. When she finally spun around, she feigned surprise. as if I had just materialized out of thin air. "Oh, Juliet," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "I did not realize it was you. The schedule just said Mrs. North. I assumed it was a client." "It is Northcott," I corrected gently, stepping into the office. "And I am a client, Brianna. Or at least, I would like to be." Brianna blinked, her perfectly manicured eyelashes fluttering. Then she let out a short, incredulous laugh. She leaned back, crossing her legs. "You a client? Juliet, this is a commercial real estate firm. We deal with high net worth individuals. We build skyscrapers, not backyard gazebos. Did Mark put you up to this? Is this some sort of cute anniversary surprise?" "Mark does not know I am here," I said, taking a seat opposite her without being invited. The chair was low, designed to make the guest look up at the executive. "I have some savings, money my parents left me. I have been reading about financial independence, and I thought I should try to grow it. Mark always says you are a genius at making money." The flattery hit its mark. Brianna preened, smoothing the lapel of her blazer. "Well, Mark is not wrong. I do have a knack for it. But Juliet, investing is a shark tank. It is not for people who get nervous balancing a checkbook. What kind of capital are we talking about? A shy of $1,000 and $1,000." I took a deep breath, acting the part of the nervous housewife perfectly. I pulled a checkbook out of my bag. $50,000. Silence hung in the room for a second. Then, Brianna threw her head back and laughed. It was a loud barking sound that made the junior associates outside look in. $50,000, she gasped, wiping a tear from her eye. "Oh, honey, that is adorable, truly. But $50,000 does not even cover the catering budget for one of our launch parties. You cannot buy a parking space in Manhattan for that amount. Heck, that would barely cover the cost of the imported brass door handles on our new project in Soho." She stood up and waved her hand, beckoning two men from the outer office to come in. They were young, slick, wearing suits that were too tight and colognes that were too strong. "Guys, you have to hear this," Brianna announced, gesturing to me as if I were a circus exhibit. "This is Mark's wife. She wants to be a player. She walked in here with $50,000 and wants to invest in the Skyline Fund." The men snickered, looking me up and down with dismissive smirks. "50,000? One of them scoffed. "Is that your grocery money for the decade?" "I think it is cute," the other one said, leaning against the doorframe. "Like a kid opening a lemonade stand in front of Goldman Sachs. Hey, maybe we can let her buy a janitor's closet." Brianna beamed at them, feeding off their cruelty. "Exactly. It is like an ant trying to crawl onto the banquet table. Juliet, listen to me. Go buy yourself a nice car. Or better yet, go to a spa. Leave the finance to the adults. You are going to get hurt playing with the big boys." I kept my hands folded in my lap, my expression neutral, though inside, a cold fury was crystallizing. I did my research. Brianna, Skyline has a distressed asset fund, a real estate investment trust that is open to smaller private buy-ins to boost liquidity. The minimum entry is exactly $50,000. It is on your website, in the fine print. Brianna rolled her eyes. That is just a legacy fund. Nobody touches that. It is dead weight. We only keep it open for tax purposes. It pays out pennies." "I do not mind earning pennies," I said softly. "I just want to start somewhere. Please, I brought the contract." I pulled a folder from my bag. Inside was a standard-looking investment agreement, but I had spent 3 nights drafting it, buried deep within the legalese of the preferred stock purchase. On page 42, Clause 17B, was a conversion right. It stated that these specific Class C shares, while yielding low dividends, carried a supervoting privilege in the event of a debt default by the parent company. It was a poison pill wrapped in a candy wrapper. Brianna looked at the folder with disgust. "I do not have time for this. Juliet, I have a meeting with the zoning board in 20 minutes. Just then, the glass doors swung open. "Brianna, are you ready? The reservation is for 12:30. It was Mark. He stopped dead when he saw me. His smile vanished, replaced by a look of sheer annoyance. He looked from Brianna, who was smirking, to the two snickering associates, and finally to me, sitting in the low chair. "Juliet," Mark asked, his voice sharp, "what are you doing here?" "She is trying to become a wolf of Wall Street." "Babe," Brianna said, walking over to Mark and placing a possessive hand on his chest. "She brought her piggy bank, $50,000. She wants to invest." Mark's face flushed red, not with embarrassment for how I was being treated, but with anger at me. He walked over and lowered his voice to a harsh whisper. "Are you insane? You are embarrassing me. This is a place of business. Juliet, these people move millions before breakfast. You come here with your allowance. Makes us look like a joke. It makes me look like I cannot provide for you." "I just wanted to help," I stammered, looking down at my shoes. "I thought if I invested, I could understand your world better, Mark." "I do not need you to understand my world," Mark snapped. "I need you to run the house and stop humiliating me in front of my colleagues. Go home, now." "I will go," I said, standing up. "But please, just sign the paper. I already printed the check. If I leave now with nothing, I will feel like a total failure. Just take the money. Use it for the door handles, please." I held out the pen. Brianna groaned, looking at her watch. "Oh my God. Just sign it so she leaves." "Brianna, seriously," Mark said, checking his reflection in the glass wall. "We are going to be late." Brianna snatched the folder from my hand. She did not read a single word. She did not check the terms. She flipped to the back page, scrawled her signature with a flourish that took up half the page, and shoved it back at me. "There," she said. "You are officially an investor. Congratulations. Now you own a microscopic piece of nothing. Can you leave now?" "Thank you," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Thank you so much." I took the countersigned copy. Brianna took the original, tore it out of the binder, and without even looking, tossed it toward the recycling bin in the corner. It missed and landed on the floor. "Oops," she laughed. "Files, trash. Same thing with this one. Come on, Mark. I need a martini." Mark didn't even look at me as they walked out. The two junior associates followed them, laughing. I stood there for a moment. The office was empty now, save for a young intern who was timidly collecting coffee cups from a side table. He looked to be about 22, wearing a suit that was clearly bought from a thrift store. He looked at me, then at the contract lying on the floor near the trash can. I watched as he walked over, picked up the document, and dusted it off. He hesitated, looking at the door where his boss had just exited, then walked over to the filing cabinet. He placed the document inside the pending folder. "It has a signature," the boy muttered to himself. "Mostly. It has to be filed." He looked at me and gave a small, awkward nod. "Have a nice day, ma'am." "You too," I said. "You did a good job today." I turned and walked out. I kept my head down until I reached the elevator. I wrote it down in silence, watching the numbers descend. 40, 30, 20. With each passing floor, the persona of the weak housewife shed from my skin like dead cells. When the doors opened at the lobby, I walked out, not toward the subway, but toward a black sedan waiting 3 blocks away. I slid into the back seat. The air conditioning was set to exactly 68 degrees. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number that was not saved in my contacts. It rang once. "Yes, madam," a crisp male voice answered. "We have the signature," I said, my voice no longer trembling. It was cold, precise, and devoid of emotion. "The Trojan horse is inside the walls. The idiot signed a Class C preferred stock agreement with a default trigger clause." "Understood," the assistant replied. "Shall we proceed with the acquisition?" "Execute Phase 1, I commanded. "I want you to activate the shell companies in the Cayman Islands. Start buying up every cent of Skyline Luxury Group's short-term debt. Contact the secondary lenders. Offer them 80 cents on the dollar. They will panic and sell. I want to own their liabilities by the end of the week. And the $50,000, madam." Let it sit in their account, I said, watching the city blur past the tinted window. Let Brianna buy her door handles. It will be the most expensive purchase she ever makes. I hung up. Meanwhile, 20 blocks north, in a French restaurant that charged $100 for an appetizer, Brianna and Mark were clinking glasses. Did you see her face? Brianna giggled, sipping her drink. God, she looked like a lost puppy. $50,000. I almost felt bad. Almost. Mark shook his head, cutting into his steak. I do not know what got into her. She used to be content just staying at home. Now she thinks she can play business. It is pathetic. Well, do not worry about it, Brianna purred, sliding a foot up Mark's leg under the table. Once we finalize the merger with the Vanta Black Fund, I will get that bonus. Then we can talk to the lawyers. You said the house is in both names. Yeah, Mark said, chewing thoughtfully. But she has no income. If we divorce, she cannot afford the maintenance fees or the property tax. She will have to sell her share to me for peanuts just to get quick cash. We can kick her out within a month. Perfect, Brianna smiled, her eyes gleaming with greed. I have always hated how she decorated that place anyway. Too beige. We will gut it, make it modern, make it worthy of us. To us, Mark said, raising his glass again. To the power couple. To the power couple, Brianna echoed. They laughed, drinking their expensive wine, surrounded by the illusion of their own invincibility. They had no idea that the lost puppy they had just mocked was currently authorizing a wire transfer of $200 million to purchase the mortgage on the very building they were eating in. They did not know that the clock had started ticking. I checked my watch. It was 1:45 in the afternoon. The market would close in 2 hours and 15 minutes. By the time the closing bell rang, I would own 30% of Skyline's operational debt. I leaned back in the leather seat of the car and allowed myself a single, small smile. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a hunter who saw the prey walk willingly into the cage and lock the door behind them. Drive, I told the chauffeur. We have an empire to dismantle. The envelope Mark slid across the kitchen island was thick, heavy, and beige. It landed next to my cup of herbal tea with a dull thud that sounded remarkably like a coffin lid closing. It was Tuesday morning. Outside, the New York rain was hammering against the glass, turning the city into a gray smear. Inside, the air was perfectly climate-controlled, yet it felt suffocating. It is standard, Juliet, Mark said, not looking me in the eye. He was adjusting his tie in the reflection of the microwave. My lawyer drew it up. It is a no-fault divorce, irreconcilable differences. It is the cleanest way. I picked up the document. Dissolution of marriage. The title read in bold, black letters. I flipped to the financial section. It was brutal. He was offering me a monthly alimony of $2,000 for 2 years. $2,000. In Manhattan. That would barely cover the maintenance fees for a broom closet. And then there was the housing clause. I had 30 days to vacate the premises. 30 days, I asked, my voice level. Mark finally turned to look at me. He had his reasonable businessman face on, the one he used when he was trying to lowball a subcontractor. Look, Jules, I know it seems tight, but the market is moving fast. I need to refinance the apartment to pull out some equity for investments. I cannot do that with your name on the title. $2,000 a month is generous considering you brought 0 assets into this marriage. You have your little inheritance to fall back on, right? And you can probably stay with your sister in Jersey until you get on your feet. He expected me to cry. He expected me to beg. He expected the Juliet he knew, the fragile, dependent creature who needed him to open jars and pay bills. He was braced for a fight, ready to list all the reasons why I deserved nothing. I reached into my purse, pulled out a fountain pen, and uncapped it. Okay, I said. Mark blinked. Okay, what do you mean, okay? I mean, okay, I repeated. I flipped to the last page, found the signature line, and signed my name in a fluid, steady hand. Juliet Northcott. I do not want to fight. Mark, if you want to end it, let us end it. I will be out in 3 weeks. I pushed the papers back to him, Mark stood there, frozen, his mouth opened slightly, then closed. He looked at the signature, then back at me, suspicion clouding his eyes. It was too easy. He felt it, but his arrogance overrode his instinct. He decided that I was simply too stupid or too beaten down to understand what I was signing away. "Right," he stammered, snatching the papers before I could change my mind. "Well, that is mature of you, sensible. I will have the movers come help you with your things. You can take the bedroom set in the guest room, and the Honda." "Thank you, Mark," I said, taking a sip of my tea. "You are very kind." He left for work whistling. He thought he had just won the lottery. He thought he had discarded a liability. He had no idea he had just severed the only safety line keeping him from falling into the abyss. While Mark was celebrating his freedom, the storm was making landfall at Skyline Luxury Group. It began as a tremor. My instructions to my private equity team had been precise. We did not attack Skyline directly. That would be too obvious. Instead, we went after their oxygen. Real estate development runs on credit. It is a game of leverage, borrowing massive sums to build, then refinancing or selling to pay it back. Skyline had 3 major revolving credit lines with mid-tier banks. I owned the debt of 2 of those banks. At 10 o'clock that morning, the chief financial officer of Skyline received a notification. Their request to draw down another $5 million for construction costs had been denied. The reason given was a reassessment of risk exposure. By noon, the suppliers for their crown jewel project in Brooklyn stopped delivering steel. They had heard rumors I had carefully planted through third-party analysts that Skyline was having liquidity issues. In the construction world, fear spreads faster than fire. If you think you might not get paid, you do not drop the steel. Brianna was in the center of the chaos. I had hacked into the internal security feed of her office, a simple task given their outdated firewall, and I watched the feed on my tablet while I packed my clothes. She was pacing back and forth, screaming into her headset. "What do you mean the funds are frozen?" she shrieked. "We have a concrete pour scheduled for tomorrow. If those trucks do not show up, we lose the entire week. Fix it. Tell the bank who we are. Tell them we are Skyline." She slammed the phone down. Her face was flushed, her hair disheveled. The cool, superior ice queen I had met yesterday was melting under the heat. She marched out to the sales floor. "Why are the phones silent?" she yelled at her team of terrified sales agents. "We need cash flow. Call the wait list. Offer them a 5% discount if they close in 48 hours. Sell the penthouses. I do not care if you have to promise them a golden toilet. Just bring me signed contracts." "But Brianna," one brave soul ventured, "the clients are asking about the construction halt rumors. They are scared to put down deposits." "There are no rumors," Brianna roared. "It is just a logistical hiccup. The economy is just sluggish. It is the market's fault, not ours. Now get back on the phone before I fire every single one of you." She was cracking. It was delicious. But she was just the lieutenant. I was waiting for the general. At 2 o'clock, he arrived. Thomas Sterling. He swept into the Skyline offices like a king returning to quell a peasant revolt. He was a man of 65 who tried desperately to look 45. He wore Italian suits that cost more than most people's cars, dyed his hair a jet black that absorbed light, and smoked cigars indoors because he believed fines were just the price of admission for being rich. He was the kind of man who believed gravity should ask for his permission before working. He called an emergency board meeting. I listened in via the bug I had planted in the conference room speakerphone system years ago, a precaution I took with many major firms in the city. You never know when information will be useful. "Calm down," Thomas boomed, his voice gravelly with smoke and entitlement. "Everyone, calm down. This is a minor blip. The banks are just tightening their belts because the Fed is making noise about interest rates. It is nothing I have not seen 10 times before." "But Thomas," the CFO said, his voice trembling, "we have $20 million in short-term notes coming due next week. If the credit lines are frozen, we default. If we default, The cross-collateralization clauses kick in. We could lose everything. We will not default, Thomas sneered. I built this company from a single brick. Do you think I am going to let a few nervous bankers bring me down? I am already in talks with a private party, an angel investor, someone with vision who understands that Skyline is too big to fail. I smiled as I folded a sweater into my suitcase. An angel investor. He was talking about Vanta Black Holdings. He was talking about me. He just did not know it yet. He thought he was finding a savior. In reality, he was inviting the executioner to dinner. Who is this investor? A board member asked. A private equity firm, Thomas said vaguely. Very exclusive. They approached me a few months ago. I put them off then. But I will call them today. They will beg us for money. We are Skyline. We are the face of New York luxury. Now, stop whining and get back to work. Brianna, make sure the sales numbers look pretty for the due diligence team. Yes, Daddy, Brianna said, her voice small. While Thomas was puffing out his chest and making empty promises, I was making moves on the open market. Skyline was a publicly traded company. Though the Sterling family held a large chunk of the voting shares, the bad news about the credit freeze had leaked, helped along by a few anonymous tips I had sent to financial blogs. The stock price was wobbling. It opened at $42 a share. By lunch, it was down to $38. I instructed my brokers to execute a creeping tender offer. We bought small blocks of shares, just under the 5% reporting threshold. Using multiple offshore entities, we were vacuuming up the floating stock. Every time a panicked investor sold, I bought. I was artificially suppressing the price by shorting it with one hand and buying the dip with the other. It was a complex dance, illegal if you got caught. But I wrote the software that monitored the SEC's detection algorithms. I would not get caught. By the time the market closed, I secretly controlled 12% of Skyline Luxury Group. Combined with the debt I had purchased, my grip was tightening around Thomas Sterling's throat, and he still thought he was breathing fresh air. That evening, Mark came home early. He was practically vibrating with excitement. You are packing, he observed, seeing the boxes in the hallway. I am, I said. I found a place. A friend said I could stay with her for a while. Good, good, Mark said, barely listening. He poured himself a whiskey. Jules, you will not believe it. I just got off the phone with Brianna, her father, Thomas Sterling. He personally asked about me. He knows about the construction delays on my current project, and he said Skyline needs a new lead contractor for their next phase. He hinted that if I play my cards right, I could be made a partner in their development arm. That sounds wonderful. Mark, I said, taping up a box labeled books. But I thought they were having financial trouble. I saw something on the news about a credit freeze. Mark laughed, a condescending sound that grated on my nerves. The news, fake news. Jules, Thomas explained it all. It is just a strategic restructuring to prepare for a massive capital injection. They have a new investor coming in, billions of dollars, and I am going to be right there at the top when the money starts flowing. Brianna says her dad loves my aggressive style. I am happy for you, I said, and I meant it. I was happy he was climbing so high. The fall would be that much more spectacular. So, Mark said, checking his watch, where is this friend's place, Queens, Brooklyn? It is in the city, I said vaguely. Do not worry about it. I will send the rest of my things later. I walked out of the apartment we had shared for 10 years. I left the keys on the console table. I did not look back. Downstairs, a nondescript Uber was waiting. I had it drive me 3 blocks. Then I got out and walked around the corner to where my driver, Alfred, was waiting with the Bentley. To the residence, madam, Alfred asked, opening the door. Yes, Alfred, take me home. We drove toward Central Park South. The car glided to a stop in front of the Pinnacle, the tallest, most exclusive residential tower in the Western Hemisphere. The doorman rushed to open the door, bowing low. Welcome back, Ms. Northcott, he said. We have missed you. It is good to be back, Henry, I said. I took the private elevator to the 90th floor. The doors opened directly into my penthouse. It spanned the entire floor, 20-foot ceilings, floor-to-ceiling glass walls overlooking the entire island of Manhattan, marble floors heated from beneath, and a collection of modern art that was worth more than the gross domestic product of a small country. This was my sanctuary. This was the fortress I had built with my own mind and my own ruthless ambition. I kicked off my sensible shoes, the ones Mark liked, and walked barefoot across the cool stone. I went to the wet bar and poured a glass of vintage Pinot Noir, a bottle that cost $4,000. I walked to the window. Below me, the city was a grid of golden lights. Somewhere down there, in a much smaller, sadder apartment, Mark was probably calling Brianna, dreaming of a future that was already dead. Somewhere down there, Thomas Sterling was smoking a cigar, thinking he was the master of the universe, unaware that he was already a tenant in my property. I pulled out my phone and opened my trading app. Skyline Luxury Group closed at $35. My small investment of $50,000 was sitting in their account, a dormant virus waiting for the signal. My debt holdings were poised to strangle their cash flow, and my equity stake was growing by the hour. I swirled the wine in the glass, watching the red liquid catch the light. 30 days, I whispered to the city lights. You gave me 30 days to leave, Mark, but I do not think you will last 30 hours. I took a sip of wine. It tasted like victory. The net was cast. The weights were attached. Now, all I had to do was pull. The news broke on a Wednesday morning, splashed across the financial tickers and whispered in the corridors of power. Thomas Sterling had held a press conference on the steps of the stock exchange. His face flushed with the kind of triumphant arrogance that usually precedes a Greek tragedy. He announced that Skyline Luxury Group had secured a strategic partnership with a private equity firm known as Vanta Black Holdings. He called it a monumental infusion of capital that would propel the company into the next century. He did not mention that the terms of the deal were so aggressive they effectively mortgaged his soul. He only saw the zeros in the bank account. He did not see the shackles. For Brianna, this announcement was not just a lifeline, it was a coronation. I watched her from afar, through the lens of social media and the reports of my private investigators. She was practically levitating. In her mind, the arrival of Vanta Black meant the departure of the old guard. She believed that her father, tired from the stress of the negotiation, would step up to chairman emeritus and hand the CEO title to her. She began giving interviews to lifestyle magazines, posing in hard hats and couture gowns, talking about her vision for a younger, sharper Skyline. And Mark. Mark was the dutiful prince consort. He was everywhere she was, smiling that practiced, plastic smile. He had been promoted, just as he predicted. He was now the senior project manager for the entire Skyline portfolio. He bought a new Porsche. He started wearing watches that were too big for his wrist. They were the it couple of the moment, riding a wave of borrowed money and baseless confidence. Then came the invitation. It arrived at my sister's house in New Jersey, where Mark assumed I was staying. My sister, knowing the game I was playing, had couriered it to my penthouse immediately. It was a heavy cream-colored card with gold leaf lettering. You are cordially invited to the Skyline Renaissance Gala, celebrating the strategic partnership with Vanta Black Holdings, the Plaza Hotel, Grand Ballroom. There was a handwritten note at the bottom, scrawled in Brianna's spiky, aggressive script. Juliet, come see what real success looks like. Bring a Tupperware if you want to take some food home. B. It was petty. It was cruel. It was designed to rub my nose in their victory, to show me that I was the discarded past and they were the glorious future. They wanted me to stand in the corner in my beige cardigan, sipping tap water, watching them toast to their brilliance. They had no idea that they had just invited the owner of the slaughterhouse to the cattle auction. The night of the gala. The air in New York was crisp and electric. I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in my dressing room. The woman staring back at me was a stranger to Mark. She was a stranger to Brianna, but she was the woman I had always been in the dark, the woman who moved markets with a whisper. I was done with beige. I was done with sensible things. I wore a gown commissioned from a reclusive designer in Paris. It was black, but not a flat, morning black. It was a deep, absorbing void of a color, made of crushed velvet and silk that seemed to swallow the light around it. It hugged every curve of my body, structured and imposing, with a neckline that was daring yet regal. Around my neck, I fastened a necklace of raw, uncut diamonds set in blackened platinum. It looked less like jewelry and more like a weapon. My hair, usually pulled back in a messy bun, was styled in sleek, sharp waves that framed a face painted with precision. My lips were a deep crimson. I did not look like a wife. I looked like a widow who had killed the husband herself and enjoyed it. "The car is ready, madam," Alfred announced from the doorway. "Thank you, Alfred," I said, sliding my feet into 6-inch stilettos that cost more than Mark's new car. "Let us go inspect my purchase." The arrival at the plaza was a chaotic symphony of flashbulbs and shouting paparazzi. When the Bentley pulled up, the photographers paused. They did not recognize the car. They did not recognize the driver. But when I stepped out, the silence that fell over the red carpet was palpable. I walked the gauntlet, not with the timid shuffle of Juliet Northcott, but with the predatory stride of the cardinal. I did not smile for the cameras. I looked through them. Inside, the ballroom was a grotesque display of excess: champagne fountains, aerial acrobats hanging from silk ropes, and an ice sculpture of the Skyline logo that was slowly melting in the heat of 1,000 bodies. The room was packed with the elite of New York bankers, politicians, celebrities, and the hangers-on who fed off them. I spotted them immediately. They were holding court near the stage. Thomas Sterling was laughing with a senator, a cigar in one hand and a scotch in the other. Brianna was shimmering in gold, a dress that screamed for attention, clinging to Mark's arm as if he were a prize she had won at a carnival. I began to move through the crowd. People parted for me, not because they knew who I was, but because power has a gravity of its own. I heard whispers as I passed. "Who is that? Is she a model? Is she royalty?" I walked straight up to the happy couple. Mark saw me first. He was in the middle of telling a joke about a concrete supplier when his eyes locked onto me. The punchline died in his throat. He blinked. Once, twice, his mouth went slack. He looked at the woman in the black velvet gown, terrified and confused, trying to reconcile this vision with the memory of the woman who used to clip coupons at his kitchen table. "Juliet," he whispered, the name sounding like a question. Brianna turned sharply. Her eyes widened, scanning me from the diamonds at my throat to the hem of my gown. For a split second, I saw pure, unadulterated envy. Then, her defense mechanisms kicked in. She sneered, masking her insecurity with disdain. "Well, well," Brianna drawled, her voice loud enough to attract the attention of the circle around them. "Look who decided to crash the party. I must say, Juliet, you clean up. Surprisingly well. Did you rent the dress? Or is that what you spent your alimony check on?" A ripple of laughter went through the group of sycophants surrounding them. They were eager to please the heiress. "Hello, Brianna?" "Hello, Mark," I said. My voice was low, smooth, and utterly devoid of warmth. It cut through the noise of the party like a scalpel. "I am surprised you showed up," Mark said, finding his voice, though he sounded breathless. "I thought you would be busy, packing." "I finished packing," I said, my eyes boring into his. "I find that when you get rid of the garbage, moving becomes much lighter." Mark flinched. Brianna stepped forward, placing herself between me and Mark, marking her territory. She swirled her champagne glass, looking at me with a pitying smirk. "So, why are you here? Really?" she asked, tilting her head. "Did you come to beg for a little more cash? Is $2,000 a month not enough for your new lifestyle? Or maybe—" She laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "Maybe you are here to check on your investment. How is that $50,000 doing? Juliet, have you bought your first door handle yet?" The crowd laughed louder this time. The story of the housewife investor had apparently been shared as a funny anecdote around the office. "She thinks she is a wolf of Wall Street," Brianna announced to the room. gesturing at me. She came to my office with her grocery money and demanded to buy stock. It was the saddest thing I have ever seen. I stood perfectly still. I let the laughter wash over me. I let them have their moment. I let them feel superior. I did not come to beg, Brianna, I said, my voice projecting clearly, silencing the immediate circle. And I certainly did not come for the food. Then why? Brianna challenged, stepping closer, her perfume cloying and sweet. Why are you here? I took a slow sip from the glass of water I had picked up from a passing waiter. I looked at the chandeliers. I looked at the melting ice sculpture. I looked at the panicked gleam in the eyes of the CFO standing nearby, who knew the truth about the debt, but was too scared to speak. I am here to conduct a site inspection, I said calmly. I wanted to see if the assets matched the valuation. Assets, Brianna scoffed. What assets? You own a fraction of a percent of a debt fund. You do not have assets here. Honey, you are a rounding error. I am here to check my assets, I repeated, my gaze locking onto hers. All of them, the building, the brand, the furniture, the people. You are delusional, Mark muttered, shaking his head. Juliet, you need help. You are embarrassing yourself. Please, just leave before security has to escort you out. It is sad, really, a woman in the crowd whispered. Divorce drives some women crazy. She thinks she owns the place, another man chuckled. Just then, the music swelled, the lights dimmed, a spotlight hit the stage. Thomas Sterling was making his way to the podium. The crowd turned their attention to the patriarch, eager for the speech. Thomas looked powerful up there. He adjusted the microphone, beaming at the sea of faces. He did not see me. I was blocked by the throng of people. Ladies and gentlemen, Thomas boomed. Thank you for coming. Tonight is a historic night tonight. We celebrate the rebirth of Skyline. We have weathered the storm, and we have emerged stronger than ever, thanks to our new partners at Vanta Black Holdings. Applause erupted. Brianna clapped the loudest, looking at me with a triumphant sneer. You hear that? She hissed at me, leaning in close. That is the sound of winning. That is the sound of power, something you will never understand. She signaled to a large man in a black suit standing by the wall, the head of security. Enjoy the speech, Juliet, Brianna whispered, because as soon as my father steps off that stage, I am having you thrown out on the street. I do not want your desperate energy ruining my party. We will see who leaves tonight, Brianna, I said. Oh, we will see, she retorted. Now, stand back. I need to go up there. Daddy is going to announce the new executive structure. He is going to name the new CEO. She smoothed her gold dress, fixed her hair, and prepared to ascend the stairs to the stage, convinced that the crown was about to be placed on her head. I watched her go. I watched Mark look at me one last time with a mixture of pity and annoyance, before turning back to watch his girlfriend take the spotlight. I remained where I was, a dark statue in the middle of the celebration. I checked my watch. It was 8:59. My lawyers were scheduled to enter the room at exactly 9 o'clock. The trap was not just set. The jaws were already closing, and they were too busy clapping to hear the snap. The boardroom of Skyline Luxury Group was a shark tank disguised as a sanctuary of high finance. It was located on the 50th floor, a glass-walled aquarium that floated above the grime of the city, insulated from the consequences of the decisions made within its walls. The table was a single slab of mahogany, long enough to land a small plane on, polished to a mirror shine that reflected the distorted faces of the nervous board members. It has been exactly 1 week since the gala. The hangover from the champagne had faded, replaced by the jittery anticipation of the acquisition. I was not in the room yet. I was watching them from the security feed on my tablet in the adjacent holding room. Brianna sat to the right of the empty chairman's seat. She looked every inch the Dauphin waiting for the crown. She wore a white power suit that cost more than the average American family earned in 6 months. Her posture was rigid, her chin tilted up, radiating a confidence that was brittle and entirely unearned. She was tapping her gold pen against a leather notebook, impatient for the coronation to begin. Mark sat next to her. He looked less like a shark and more like a remora fish attached to one. He was trying to look relaxed, leaning back in his chair, but his leg was bouncing under the table. He was wearing a tie I had bought him 3 Christmases ago. It was a nice tie. It would look excellent in his mugshot later. "Where are they?" Brianna snapped, checking her diamond-encrusted watch. Vantablack's representatives were supposed to be here at 9 sharp. It is 9:05. This is unprofessional. "Relax, babe," Mark soothed, placing a hand on her arm. "They are probably just finalizing the paperwork. You know how these private equity guys are. They like to make an entrance. Besides, once you are CEO, you can fire them if they are late." "I will," Brianna muttered. "I will fire the whole legal team if they do not get their act together. I have a lunch reservation at Le Bernardin at 1. The other board members, a collection of gray-haired men who had spent decades yes-manning Thomas Sterling, sat in uneasy silence. They knew the company was bleeding. They knew Vantablack was not a partner. It was a ventilator for a dying patient. But they did not know who held the plug. At 9:10, the double doors at the far end of the room swung open. The conversation died instantly. 6 lawyers in identical charcoal suits marched in. They moved with the synchronized precision of a firing squad. They did not smile. They did not offer handshakes. They carried thick leather briefcases and an air of absolute, terrifying authority. At the lead was Arthur Sterling, no relation to Thomas. A delicious irony I enjoyed my chief legal counsel. He was a man who could smile while severing your artery. "Good morning," Arthur said. His voice was not loud, but it carried to the back of the room. He placed his briefcase on the table with a heavy thud. "You are late," Brianna announced, standing up. "I am Brianna Sterling. I assume you have the transfer documents ready for my signature. We are on a tight schedule." Arthur did not look at her. He continued to arrange his papers. "We are on the schedule of the majority shareholder, Ms. Sterling, and the principal is never late. The principal arrives precisely when she intends to." "Principal?" Mark asked, frowning. "We thought Vantablack was a consortium. Who is the principal?" "The sole owner of Vantablack Holdings," Arthur replied, finally looking up. His eyes were cold behind his rimless glasses. "She requested to lead this meeting personally." "She," Brianna scoffed. "Great. Another woman trying to prove something. Well, tell her to hurry up. My father is dialing in from the golf course in 10 minutes. "Your father will not be dialing in," Arthur said calmly. "We have cut the remote access line. This is a closed meeting." "Excuse me." Brianna's voice rose an octave. "You cannot do that. This is my company." "Not anymore," Arthur said. He turned toward the door and nodded. That was my cue. I pushed the heavy oak doors open. I was not wearing the beige cardigan. I was not wearing the outdated dress. I was wearing a bespoke suit from Savile Row, tailored to within a millimeter of my life. It was a deep, charcoal gray, almost black. The jacket was sharp-shouldered, the trousers tapered. I wore no jewelry except for a single platinum pin on my lapel in the shape of a phoenix. My hair was pulled back in a severe, sleek ponytail that exposed the sharp angles of my face. I walked into the room. The sound of my heels on the marble floor was a slow, rhythmic hammer. Click, click, click. I walked past the gaping board members. I walked past the lawyers who bowed their heads in deference. I stopped at the head of the table. For 3 seconds, nobody breathed. Mark stared at me. His eyes were wide, unblinking, his mouth hanging open in a silent scream of confusion. He looked like a computer trying to process a file format it did not recognize. Brianna was the first to break the silence. She let out a laugh that sounded like glass breaking. "Juliet," she shrieked, "what the hell are you doing here? Did you follow us? How did you get past security?" She turned to the lawyers, her face twisting into a mask of outrage. "Is this a joke? Who let this woman in? She is my boyfriend's mentally unstable ex-wife. Get her out of here. Security." She reached for the phone on the table. "Sit down, Brianna," I said. My voice was not loud. It was not emotional. It was the voice of a judge reading a death sentence. Brianna froze, her hand hovering over the receiver. "Excuse me, you do not tell me what to do in my own boardroom. Mark, get her out." Mark started to stand up, his face flushing red. "Juliet, seriously, this is insane. You are trespassing. I know you are upset about the divorce, but stalking us to a board meeting, this is a new low. Please, leave before you get arrested." I did not look at Mark. I looked at Arthur. "Read the statement," I commanded. Arthur cleared his throat. "As of 8 a.m. this morning, Vantablack Holdings has exercised its option to convert all outstanding debt of Skyline Luxury Group into equity. Furthermore, we have acquired 51% of the voting shares through open market transactions and private acquisitions. The sole proprietor and chairwoman of Vantablack Holdings is Ms. Juliet Northcott." The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy. It was a physical weight that pressed down on everyone in the room. Mark dropped his pen. It hit the mahogany table with a sharp clack that sounded like a gunshot. It rolled off the edge and fell to the floor. But he did not move to pick it up. He stared at me, the color draining from his face until he looked like a wax figure. "What?" he whispered. "Vantablack you." Brianna shook her head violently. No, that is a lie. That is impossible." She slammed her hands on the table. "She is a housewife. She clips coupons. She invests $50,000 in penny stocks. She does not own a private equity firm. This is fraud. You are all actors. I am calling the police." I moved. I walked around the head of the table. I pulled out the massive leather chair, the chairman's chair. The seat Thomas Sterling had warmed for 30 years. I sat down. I leaned back, resting my elbows on the armrests and steepling my fingers. I looked at Brianna, who was standing there shaking, her chest heaving with panic. "Sit down, Brianna," I repeated, "or I will have security remove you for disrupting a shareholder meeting." Brianna slumped into her chair as if her strings had been cut. She looked at Mark, pleading for him to fix it, but Mark was catatonic. I reached into my leather portfolio and pulled out a thin blue folder. It was wrinkled. It had a coffee stain on the corner. I tossed it onto the center of the polished table. It slid across the wood and stopped directly in front of Brianna. "Do you recognize that file?" I asked. Brianna stared at it. Her eyes widened. It was the file she had thrown in the trash, the file the intern had retrieved. "That is," she stammered, "that is the investment agreement, the $50,000. "Correction," I said. "That is the trigger. You laughed at $50,000. You said you would not buy a door handle. You were right. It did not buy a door handle. It bought a Class C preferred share with a specific covenant. Clause 17B. In the event that the company's debt-to-equity ratio exceeds 4-1, the Class C holder gains immediate veto power over all executive appointments." I paused, letting the words sink in. "You are over-leveraged by 6-1. Brianna, I triggered the clause this morning, and then I bought the bank that held your mortgage just to make sure there was no way out." "You," Mark croaked. "You bought the bank." "I own the bank, Mark," I said, finally turning my cold gaze to him. "I have owned it for 5 years. While you were explaining business to me at the dinner table, I was approving the loans that kept your little construction projects alive." Mark looked like he was going to be sick. "But why?" Brianna whispered, tears welling up in her eyes, not tears of sorrow, but tears of frustration. "Why did you trick us?" "I did not trick you," I said. "I offered you an investment. You treated me like garbage. You treated my money like a joke. Now, I am here to manage my investment." I opened a second folder, this one thick and crisp. "Let us review the performance of the current management," I said, looking at the terrified board members. "Specifically, the director of sales." "I have done a great job," Brianna protested weakly. "Sales are up." "Sales are stagnant," I corrected, looking at the spreadsheet. "Marketing costs, however, are up 300%. Let us look at the itemized list. Shall we?" I put on a pair of reading glasses. Item 1, a corporate retreat to the Maldives, Cost $240,000. Attendees 2, you and Mark. Mark flinched. The board members gasped. Item 2, I continued, my voice relentless. Renovation of the executive suite bathroom, imported Italian marble, gold fixtures, cost $85,000, charged with the infrastructure maintenance budget. Everyone does that, Brianna cried. Not with my money. They do not, I snapped. Item 3, a consulting fee paid to a shell company registered to Mark's brother. $50,000 a month for the last 6 months. Total $300,000. Mark turned pale. That was embezzlement. That was prison time. I can explain, Mark stammered. That was for specialized engineering advice. We checked, I said. The only advice your brother is qualified to give is how to fix a carburetor. He is a mechanic in Jersey. I took off my glasses and tossed them onto the documents. You have treated this company like your personal piggy bank, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You have insulted your investors. You have cooked the books. And you have done it all while standing on a pedestal of arrogance that is about to collapse. You cannot fire me, Brianna hissed. My father is the chairman. He owns 51%. Your father owns nothing, I said. He pledged his personal shares as collateral for the emergency loan I gave him last week, the loan he defaulted on at 8:01 this morning. Brianna's mouth opened, but no sound came out. So, I said, standing up and placing my hands on the table, let us make this official. I looked at the board members. I moved to terminate Brianna Sterling from her position as Director of Sales, effective immediately, for cause, all in favor. Every single hand in the room went up. Even the men who had known Brianna since she was a child raised their hands. They were survivors. They knew where the power lay now. Motion carried, I said. I looked down at Brianna. Get out of my chair, I said, and get out of my building. You have 10 minutes to clear your desk before security escorts you out. Whatever is left in your office after 10 minutes belongs to me, including your purse. My purse, Brianna gasped, clutching her designer bag. Bought with a corporate credit card on November 14th, I recited from memory. Technically, it is company property. Leave it. Brianna looked around the room, searching for an ally. She found only cold stares in the averted eyes of the man she thought loved her. Mark was staring at the table, trying to make himself invisible. She let out a sob, half rage, half despair, and stood up. She looked at me with pure hatred. My father will kill you, she spat. Your father, I said calmly, is the next item on the agenda. Close the door on your way out. Brianna fled. The sound of her sobbing echoed in the hallway until the heavy doors slammed shut. I sat back down. I turned to Mark. He was still sitting there, frozen. Mr. Evans, I said, using his last name. Why are you still here? You are not a board member. You are a contractor. Juliet, Mark whispered. Baby, please. Address me as Madam Chairwoman, I corrected him. Madam Chairwoman, Mark choked out. We need to talk. About us. About the mistake I made. We will talk, I promised him, a small, cruel smile playing on my lips. But not here, and not now. Right now. I have a cleaning company to clean. Get out. Mark scrambled out of his chair, grabbing his briefcase but leaving the dropped pen on the floor. He practically ran after Brianna. The room was silent again. The board members looked at me with fear and awe. I picked up the pen Mark had dropped. It was a cheap promotional pen with the Skyline logo. I turned it over in my fingers. Now, I said to the room, let us talk about the real numbers. I had the throne, I had the crown, and outside the door, the guillotine was being sharpened for the final execution. They did not make it to the elevators. I had anticipated their flight response. It is the natural instinct of prey when the predator reveals its teeth. But I was not interested in a hunt. I was interested in a public execution. Bring them back, I spoke into the intercom on the mahogany table. 2 seconds later, the heavy double doors swung open again. 2 of my personal security details. Men who were built like linebackers and wore expressions of stone. escorted Brianna and Mark back into the boardroom. Brianna looked indignant, her face blotchy with rage. Mark looked like a man walking to the gallows. "This is kidnapping," Brianna shrieked, trying to shake off the guard's hand. "You cannot keep us here. I am calling the police." "Please do," I said, gesturing to the phone. "It will save me the trouble of dialing 911 myself when I hand over the evidence of your grand larceny. Sit down." The guard pressed a firm hand on her shoulder, forcing her back into the chair she had vacated only moments ago. Mark sank into the seat beside her, his head in his hands. "We are not finished," I announced to the silent boardroom. "The termination of Brianna Sterling is not merely a change of management. It is a necessary surgical procedure to remove a tumor." I nodded to Arthur, my lawyer. He tapped a key on his laptop, and the massive projection screen at the end of the room descended. "Let us look at the specifics of why you are being fired for cause," I said, my voice cutting through the tension like a razor. "Nonsense expenses like handbags are one thing, systematic embezzlement is another." The screen flared to life. It displayed a spreadsheet titled, "Project Alpha Discretionary Funds." "You set up a vendor account for a company called Sterling Consulting," I explained, using a laser pointer to highlight the rows of numbers. "Payments of $15,000 were made every Friday for the last 18 months. The stated purpose was market research. However, our forensic accountants traced the routing numbers." I clicked the remote. The screen changed to show a bank statement. "The money went directly into a joint account held by Brianna Sterling and Mark Evans," I said. "And what was this money used for market research? No. It paid for the lease on a Porsche 911. It paid for a membership at the Soho House. And, most interestingly, it paid for the down payment on a condominium in Miami that Mark put in his own name last week." The board members gasped. The betrayal of fiduciary duty was glaring. Mark looked up, sweat beading on his forehead. "That was a bonus," Brianna said. "It was a bonus structure." "A bonus that was never approved by the compensation committee?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "That is not a bonus. Mark, that is theft." I turned my gaze to Brianna. She was pale, her lips trembling. "You are fired effective immediately for gross misconduct, fraud, and embezzlement," I stated formally. "You are stripped of all unvested stock options. The company will be filing a civil suit to recover every single penny you stole, plus damages. And since the amount exceeds $100,000, we are obligated to report this to the district attorney." Brianna slammed her fist on the table. "You cannot do this. I am Sterling. This is my father's company. I can spend the money however I want." "It is a public company," I corrected her. "Or it was, until I took it private this morning. You stole from shareholders. You stole from me." Mark suddenly stood up. The realization that he was facing potential jail time, and certainly financial ruin, seemed to snap something in his brain. He looked at Brianna with disgust, then turned to me. His face transformed. The arrogance vanished, replaced by a desperate, pathetic, pleading mask. "Juliet," he said, his voice cracking. He took a step toward me, hands outstretched. "Juliet, honey, please, you have to listen to me." "Sit down, Mark," I said coldly. "No, listen." He fell to his knees, right there on the expensive carpet. It was a grotesque display. "I did not know. She told me it was legal. She manipulated me. Juliet. You know I am not good with the finance stuff. I just signed what she told me to sign. I am a victim here too." He looked up at me with wet, puppy dog eyes, the same eyes that used to make me forgive him for forgetting our anniversary. "I love you, Juliet," he blubbered. "We have been married for 10 years. You know me. I am your husband. I am your Mark. Do not let them send me to jail. I will testify against her. I will do whatever you want. Just, please, baby, take me back. We can fix this." Brianna stared at him, her mouth agape. "Mark, you coward. You said you loved me." "Shut up," Mark screamed at her. "You ruined my life. You dragged me into this." He turned back to me. "Juliet, look at me. It is us against the world. Remember, like we always said, I made a mistake, a stupid mistake, but I am here now. I am choosing you. I looked down at him. 10 years of marriage, 10 years of washing his clothes, cooking his meals, listening to his complaints, supporting his dreams, and in 2 minutes, he had thrown his mistress under the bus to save his own skin. You are choosing me, I asked softly. Yes, yes. Mark nodded vigorously, hoping to light up his face. I am choosing you. Let us go home. Let us go back to the penthouse. I will fire the divorce lawyer today. That is interesting, I said, because that is not what you sounded like 3 weeks ago. I pulled a small digital recorder from my pocket. It was the device I had planted in the dining room of our apartment before I left. Arthur, connect this to the audio system, I ordered. Arthur took the device and plugged it into the console. Juliet, what is that? Mark asked, his smile faltering. This is a recording from the night you served me the divorce papers, I said. You were on the phone with Brianna after I went to bed. Or at least, you thought I went to bed. I pressed play. Mark's voice boomed through the surround sound speakers, clear and undeniable. God, she is so pathetic. Brianna, she actually cried when she signed the papers. I almost laughed in her face. She looks like such a frump in those old sweaters. I cannot wait to get her out of the house so we can renovate. Do you think we can sell her jewelry? It is probably worthless, but maybe we can get a few $100 for it. Honestly, being with her is like being with a dead body. She has no ambition. She is useless. I just need to tolerate her for a few more weeks until I get the house title. And then I am going to throw her out on the street where she belongs. The recording ended with the sound of Mark laughing. The silence in the boardroom was absolute. It was heavy, suffocating, and final. Mark was still on his knees, but he was no longer looking at me. He was staring at the floor, his face a mask of horror. He knew there was no coming back from that. He had been stripped naked in front of the most powerful people in his industry. I looked at the board members. They were looking at Mark with pure revulsion. Even in the cutthroat world of business, there is a code. You do not talk about your wife like that. You do not plot to destroy the person who supported you. You called me a dead body, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. You called me useless. You planned to sell my mother's jewelry for pocket change. Juliet, Mark whispered, but he had no words left. You want to know about ambition. Mark? I stood up and walked around the table until I was standing right in front of him. Ambition is not stealing from your wife. Ambition is not sleeping with the boss's daughter to get a promotion. Ambition is building an empire so large that when you finally decide to crush the insects that bit you, the entire world feels the tremor. I looked at Arthur. Terminate the contract with Evans Construction, I ordered. Invoke the morality clause, effective immediately, and blacklist him. Send a memo to every developer in the tri-state area. If anyone hires Mark Evans or any company associated with him, Vantablack Holdings will pull their funding. He will never pour another cubic inch of concrete in this city again. Done, Arthur said, typing furiously. Mark slumped back on his heels. A broken man. His career was over. His marriage was over. His freedom was in jeopardy. But Brianna was not done. She had been watching Mark's destruction with wide eyes. But when she heard the finality in my voice, a switch flipped in her. She stood up. Her face twisted into a snarl of pure entitlement. You think you have won, she screamed, her voice shrill and hysterical. You think you can just walk in here and take my legacy. Do you know who I am? I am Sterling. She grabbed her phone from the table. Her hands were shaking so hard she dropped it once, then fumbled to pick it up. I am calling my father, she threatened, holding the phone up like a grenade. He will fix this. He knows judges. He knows senators. He will have you arrested for corporate espionage. He will destroy you. Juliet. He will bury you so deep nobody will ever find you. The board members looked nervous. Thomas Sterling was a bully, and he still wielded influence. They looked at me, expecting me to stop her, to snatch the phone away. I sat back in the chairman's chair and crossed my legs. I reached for the porcelain teacup that an assistant had placed in front of me. I took a slow, deliberate sip. Earl Grey. Call him, I said. Brianna blinked. What? I said, call him, I repeated calmly. Put him on speaker. I want everyone to hear this. Brianna hesitated, confused by my lack of fear, but her desperation overrode her caution. She dialed the number. The ringing sound echoed through the silent room. 1 ring, 2 rings. Hello. The voice on the other end was gruff, loud, and unmistakable. It was Thomas Sterling. Daddy, Brianna wailed, bursting into tears. Daddy, you have to come now. It is a disaster. She is here, Juliet. She took the company. She fired me. She has security guards holding us hostage. She says she owns everything. What? Thomas roared. Who is there? Juliet Mark's wife, the housewife. Yes, Brianna sobbed. She tricked us. She bought the debt. She is sitting in your chair. Daddy, she is sitting in your chair. Put her on, Thomas shouted. Put that woman on the phone right now. Brianna shoved the phone toward me, a triumphant smirk breaking through her tears. You are dead now, she whispered. I leaned forward toward the phone. Hello, Thomas? I said. Listen to me, you miserable little gold digger, Thomas bellowed. I do not know what kind of game you are playing, but you have made a fatal mistake. Nobody steals from Thomas Sterling. Nobody. I am 5 minutes away. I am coming up there with my lawyers and the police, and I'm going to throw you out of that window myself. Do you hear me? I am going to teach you a lesson you will never forget. I am counting on it. Thomas, I said, my voice steady. I am waiting right here. Do not disappoint me. You stay right there, he screamed. Do not move a muscle. The line went dead. Brianna lowered the phone, her chest heaving. She looked at me with renewed confidence. He is coming, she said, wiping her eyes. You are done. My father destroys people for breakfast. You should run while you still can. I did not answer her. I turned to the head of security. Lock the elevators, I commanded. Nobody leaves this floor. When Mr. Sterling arrives, bring him directly here. Do not stop him. Let him storm in. I want him to have full momentum. Yes, madam, the guard replied. I poured myself another cup of tea. We have about 5 minutes, I said to the terrified board members. Please, help yourself to the refreshments. It is going to be a very entertaining morning. Mark was still on the floor, weeping silently. Brianna was pacing, muttering to herself, convinced that her savior was on his way. The board members sat like statues, afraid to breathe. I sat in the center of the storm, perfectly still. I checked the time on the wall clock. 10:15. The final piece of the puzzle was about to walk through the door. Thomas Sterling was coming to teach me a lesson. He did not know that I had been the one grading his papers for the last decade. He did not know that the lesson was not for me. It was for him, and the tuition fee was going to cost him everything he had left. 1 lump or 2? I asked Arthur, holding up the sugar tongs. Arthur smiled, the first time I had seen him show emotion all day. 2, madam. I believe we will need the energy. We waited, the silence stretched, tight as a violin string, waiting to snap. The double doors of the boardroom did not open. They exploded inward. It was a theatrical entrance, practiced and perfected over 40 years of corporate bullying. Thomas Sterling did not walk into rooms. He breached them. He slammed the heavy oak panels against the walls with a violence that made the crystal water pitchers on the table rattle. He was a large man, broad-shouldered and thick-necked, wearing a navy pinstripe suit that cost more than the average American mortgage. His face was a mask of furious crimson, veins throbbing at his temples. He was followed by a phalanx of 4 lawyers, men who looked like Dobermans straining at a leash, clutching briefcases filled with cease and desist orders and threats of litigation. Thomas did not look at me immediately. He looked at the room as a whole, claiming it with his eyes, daring anyone to challenge his presence. He saw his weeping daughter. He saw his disgraced future son-in-law on the floor. He saw the terrified board members. "Who is in charge here?" Thomas roared, his voice booming off the glass walls. I want the name of the person responsible for this circus. I will have you disbarred. I will have you sued into oblivion. I will take your house, your car, and the shoes off your feet." He marched toward the head of the table, his eyes scanning for a victim. "Daddy!" Brianna shrieked, scrambling up from her chair. She ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist, burying her face in his expensive suit jacket. "Daddy, look what she did." She pointed a trembling finger at me. "It is her," Brianna wailed, her voice thick with hatred and snot. "It is Mark's wife. The frumpy housewife I told you about, Juliet. She tricked us. She bribed the security. She says she fired me, Daddy. Make her stop. Make her leave." Thomas patted Brianna's head distractedly, his eyes narrowing as he finally turned his gaze toward the chairman's seat. "Mark's wife," Thomas spat the words like they were poison. "The one with the $50,000 piggy bank." He took a step forward, his lawyers flanking him. He was ready to crush me. He was ready to belittle me, to laugh at the little woman playing dress-up in his office. He expected to see a trembling, middle-aged woman in a floral dress, shrinking away from his masculine rage. Instead, he saw me. I did not move. I did not blink. I sat perfectly still in the high-backed leather chair, my hands resting lightly on the armrests. The charcoal suit absorbed the harsh overhead lights. My face was a mask of calm, cold indifference. Thomas frozen. He blinked once, as if clearing a smudge from his vision. He took another step, aggression still fueling his momentum, but then he stopped again. The crimson color in his face began to drain away, replaced by a confused pallor. He squinted at me. He was trying to reconcile the image of Mark's wife that Brianna had painted a pathetic, dowdy nobody with the entity sitting before him. But he was seeing something else. He was seeing a ghost from his past. I saw the recognition hit him in waves. First, it was confusing. "I know this face," his eyes said. "But from where?" It was not the face of a housewife. It was a face he had seen in nightmares. Then came the realization. 10 years ago, a rainy night in a private club in Greenwich, Thomas Sterling had been on the verge of bankruptcy. His first development company was collapsing under the weight of bad loans. He had been desperate. He had exhausted every legal avenue. He had gone to the underground market, seeking a lifeline. He had been granted an audience with a financier known only as the Cardinal. The Cardinal was a myth on Wall Street, a figure who specialized in distressed assets, who bought souls when they were cheap and sold them back at a premium. The Cardinal never met clients in public. The Cardinal never gave interviews. The Cardinal was a woman of few words, known for her ruthlessness and her ability to strip a company down to its bones in seconds. Thomas had knelt before the Cardinal that night. He had cried. He had begged for a bridge loan to save his reputation. He had signed a blood oath of repayment, promising his firstborn child if he had to. He had never seen the Cardinal's face clearly in the dim light of that club. Only the silhouette, the piercing eyes, and one specific detail. Me. I leaned forward slightly, into the pool of light from the chandelier. "Hello, Thomas," I said. My voice was low, smooth, and carried the weight of a decade of silence. "It has been a long time. You look tired." Thomas's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His hands, which had been clenched into fists, went slack at his sides. "You," he whispered. It was a sound of pure terror. "The loan from 10 years ago," I continued, conversational yet lethal. "The one structured through the Cayman Shell Company, did you ever pay off the interest, or did you just roll it over into Skyline's debt structure?" Hoping I would forget, Thomas stumbled back a step. He grabbed the back of a chair to steady himself. His lawyers looked at him, confused by his sudden weakness. "Mr. Sterling," one of the lawyers asked, "shall we serve the eviction notice?" Thomas did not hear him. His eyes were locked on my chest, specifically on the lapel of my jacket. Pinned there was a brooch made of blackened platinum and black diamonds. It was shaped like a phoenix rising from the ashes, its wings spread in a V shape. The black phoenix, the sigil of the Cardinal. It was the symbol stamped on the wax seal of the documents he had signed that night. It was the symbol he had feared every day for 10 years. The cardinal. Thomas breathed. The air left his lungs as if he had been punched in the gut. Brianna looked up at her father, confused. She wiped her eyes. "What, Daddy? What are you talking about? That is Juliet. That is Mark's ex-wife. Why are you acting so weird? Just yell at her." Thomas looked down at his daughter. For a moment, he looked at her as if she were a stranger. Then he looked back at me. The pieces fell into place. The housewife was a cover. The small investment was a Trojan horse. He had not been fighting a bored spouse. He had been unwittingly poking a sleeping dragon. "You are," Thomas stammered, his voice trembling so hard the words were barely audible. "You are her. You are the one who bought the steel mills in Pittsburgh. You are the one who liquidated the tech giants in Silicon Valley. I am the one who owns 51% of your life, Thomas," I said. The silence in the room was absolute. The board members, who had been expecting a shouting match, were now witnessing a demolition. They watched as the most arrogant man in New York shrank into a terrified child. "Daddy!" Brianna screamed, shaking his arm. "Stop it. Why are you scared of her? She is nobody. She is a loser." Thomas reacted on instinct. He whipped his arm around and shoved Brianna away from him. It was a violent, desperate motion. "Shut up!" Thomas roared at his daughter, his voice cracking with panic. "Shut your mouth, you stupid girl. Do you have any idea what you have done?" Brianna stumbled back, hitting the wall. She stared at her father in shock. He had never raised a voice to her, let alone a hand. "Daddy." Thomas ignored her. He ignored his lawyers. He ignored the board. He walked toward me. His stride was gone. His swagger was gone. He walked like a man approaching the altar of an angry god. He stopped at the foot of the table. He looked at me, his eyes pleading, sweat pouring down his face, ruining his makeup. "Cardinal," he said, using the title, not my name. "Madam, I did not know. I swear on my mother's grave, I did not know it was you. If I had known Mark was married to you, if I had known Brianna was messing with your husband, I would have stopped it. I would have fired her. I would have sent him away." "But you did not stop it, Thomas," I said, picking up my tea again. "You encouraged it. You mocked me. You called me a gold digger on the phone 5 minutes ago. You said you were going to throw me out of the window." Thomas turned a ghastly shade of gray. "I was angry. I was speaking out of turn. Please, madam, you know I respect you. You saved me 10 years ago. You gave me a second chance." "And you wasted it," I said. "You raised a daughter who thinks theft is a perk of the job. You run a company that is built on lies and debt. You are not a businessman. Thomas, you are a gambler who has run out of chips." "I can fix it," Thomas cried, his voice rising in desperation. "Give me time, I will restructure. I will pay back every cent. Just please do not do what you did to the others. Do not liquidate me. Skyline is my life." "Skyline," I said, pointing to the window where the city spread out below us, "is mine. It has been mine since 8 o'clock this morning." I stood up. Thomas flinched as if I were about to strike him. I walked slowly around the table. The clicking of my heels was the only sound in the room. I stopped in front of him. I was shorter than him. But in that moment, I towered over him. "You have a choice, Thomas," I said softly. "Anything," he whispered. "I will do anything." "Kneel," I said. Brianna gasped. "No, Daddy, do not." The lawyer stepped forward. "Mr. Sterling, you do not have to, Thomas held up a hand to stop them. He was shaking. He looked into my eyes and saw the abyss. He saw the power that could erase his name from history, seize his accounts, and leave him destitute on the street. He knew the stories. The cardinal did not leave survivors unless they surrendered unconditionally. Slowly, painfully, Thomas Sterling lowered himself. One knee touched the carpet, then the other. He bowed his head, his expensive suit straining at the seams. The man who had terrorized Wall Street, the man who had threatened to destroy me, was now kneeling at the feet of the bored housewife. "I am sorry," Thomas whispered to the floor. "I submit to the board. I submit to Vantablack Holdings. Please, have mercy." I looked over his slumped shoulders at Brianna. She was pressed against the wall, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes wide with a horror that transcended words. Her world had just shattered. The invincible father, the god of her universe, had just been brought to his knees by the woman she had laughed at. And Mark was still on the floor, watching the scene with the dull, glassy eyes of a man who realizes he has made the biggest mistake in the history of mistakes. I looked back down at Thomas. "Mercy," I mused, looking at the black phoenix on my lapel. "That is an expensive commodity, Thomas, and as you know, I do not give away anything for free." I turned to Arthur. "Draft the resignation papers," I ordered. "Total surrender of all Sterling family assets to cover the debt obligations. Thomas retires effective immediately due to health reasons, and Brianna." I paused, looking at the girl who had called my investment small. "Brianna will be escorted out of the building. If she ever sets foot in a Skyline property again, she will be arrested for trespassing." "Yes, madam," Arthur said. I looked down at the top of Thomas's head. "Get up," I said with disgust. "You are ruining the carpet." Thomas struggled to his feet, an old broken man. He did not look at me. He could not. "The meeting is adjourned," I announced to the room. "I have a company to rebuild, and I need the smell of cheap cologne and desperation cleared out of my office within 5 minutes. I turned my back on them and walked to the window, watching the city that I now owned a little bit more of. Behind me, the sound of weeping and the shuffling of feet marked the end of the Sterling dynasty. The sound of Thomas Sterling's knees hitting the floor had barely faded when the screaming began. It did not come from the broken man kneeling before me. It came from the woman who still believed she was the princess of a kingdom that no longer existed. Brianna stared at her father, her eyes bulging with a mixture of confusion and revulsion. To her, Thomas Sterling was a titan. He was the man who made waiters tremble and senators pick up on the first ring. Seeing him prostrate before me, the woman she had mocked for wearing last season's fashion was a glitch in her reality that her brain simply refused to process. "Dad!" Brianna shrieked, the sound tearing through the tense atmosphere of the boardroom. She grabbed his shoulder, trying to physically haul him back to his feet. "What are you doing? Get up, you are embarrassing me. You are embarrassing the family. Look at her. She is just Juliet." She pointed a trembling finger at me, her face twisted in a sneer that looked grotesque on her tear-stained face. "She is a nobody," Brianna continued, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "She is Mark's charity case. She clipped coupons for detergent. She is a boring, middle-aged housewife who got lucky with a divorce settlement. Why are you bowing to her? Spit on her, throw her out." Thomas Sterling froze. His body went rigid. The terror in his eyes was replaced by a flash of pure, unadulterated rage, not at me, but at the stupidity of his own flesh and blood. He realized in that split second that his daughter's arrogance was the very shovel that had dug his grave. He spun around. The movement was surprisingly fast for a man of his age. He did not gently push her away this time. He swung his open hand with the full weight of his despair and fury behind it. Smack. The sound of flesh striking flesh was loud, sharp, and brutal. It echoed off the mahogany table and the glass walls. Brianna's head snapped to the side. The force of the blow knocked her backward. She stumbled, her high heels twisting on the plush carpet, and she fell hard onto her hip. She touched her cheek, staring up at her father in stunned silence. The imprint of his hand was already blooming red against her pale skin. "Shut your mouth," Thomas roared, his voice shaking with intensity. "You ignorant, spoiled little brat. Do you have a death wish? Do you want to see us living in a cardboard box?" He pointed a shaking finger at her, his chest heaving. "You dare," Thomas hissed. "You dare speak her name without a title. You dare call her a nobody." He turned back to me, terror flooding his face again as he realized he had turned his back on the predator even for a second. He dropped back to his knees, shuffling forward until he was almost touching the hem of my desk. He clasped his hands together in a gesture of prayer. "Forgive her," Thomas begged, his voice cracking. "Please, she does not know. She is young. She is stupid. I spoiled her too much. She does not know who she is speaking to." Mark, who was still kneeling a few feet away, looked back and forth between Thomas and me. His confusion was morphing into a dawning, horrific realization. He had never seen Thomas Sterling afraid of anyone. "Mr. Sterling," Mark whispered. Who is she?" Thomas ignored Mark. He kept his eyes fixed on the phoenix brooch pinned to my lapel. "The Cardinal," Thomas stammered, using the name like a sacred invocation. "I did not know. I swear on my life. When Brianna told me about Mark's wife, about Juliet, I thought she was just some woman. I did not know she was you. I did not know Mark was married to the Cardinal." Mark gasped. The name clearly meant something to him. Perhaps a rumor he had heard in the dark corners of financial bars. A legend of a shadow investor who ate companies whole. "The Cardinal," Mark breathed, looking at me with wide, saucer-like eyes. You make meatloaf. You watch reality television." I ignored Mark. I kept my gaze locked on Thomas. "You are correcting her regarding my title, Thomas," I said, my voice cool and even. "But you are making a mistake yourself." Thomas flinched. "Madam, I do not understand." "You called me Mark's wife," I said. I slowly lifted my left hand. I showed him the bare ring finger where a diamond had sat for 10 years. "That is factually incorrect." I leaned forward, my eyes boring into his. "I am his ex-wife," I corrected him. "I signed the papers 3 days ago. But more importantly, Thomas, I am not just the Cardinal, and I am not just the owner of Vantablack Holdings." I paused to let the suspense tighten around his throat. "I am the largest single creditor of the Sterling Global Group," I declared. Thomas's face went white. No, that is impossible. You bought the debt for Skyline, the subsidiary. You only own the real estate arm." "Is that what you think?" I asked, allowing a small, cruel smile to touch my lips. "You really should read the fine print of the documents you sign, Thomas, or at least hire lawyers who can read." I picked up the small investment folder, the one Brianna had thrown in the trash, and flipped it open. "When I invested $50,000 into your distressed asset fund," I explained, speaking slowly as if to a child, "I triggered a clause in your corporate charter. But when I bought your bank debt this morning, I did not just buy the loans for Skyline Luxury Group. I bought the cross-collateralization agreements." I stood up and walked to the projection screen. I tapped a specific line on the digital chart. 10 years ago, when I saved you from bankruptcy, you restructured your empire." I reminded him. "You created a parent company, Sterling Global, to protect your assets, but in your greed, to secure lower interest rates for your construction projects last year, you pledged the assets of the parent company as a guarantee for the subsidiary's debt." Thomas started to shake his head. No, I did not. My CFO said." "Your CFO is an idiot," I cut him off. "And so are you. By defaulting on the Skyline debt at 8:01 this morning, you automatically triggered a default on the Sterling Global debt. The dominoes fell, Thomas, and I caught them all." I turned back to face them. "I do not just own this building," I said, my voice ringing with finality. "I own your house in the Hamptons. I own your private jet. I own your art collection. I own the trust fund that pays for Brianna's handbags. I own 51% of everything that has the name Sterling attached to it." I looked at Brianna. She was still on the floor, clutching her cheek. But the pain of the slap was nothing compared to the pain of the truth crashing down on her. "The $50,000 you laughed at," I asked her. "The money you said was not enough for a door handle. That was the entry fee. Brianna, that was the ticket I bought to watch your life burn. And it was the best investment I have ever made." Brianna let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. She looked at me, really looked at me. For the first time, she did not see a rival anymore. She saw a monster, She saw a force of nature that she had poked with a stick, unaware that it could swallow her whole. "You," she whispered, "you are the boss of bosses, the one they talk about in the journals, the one who destroyed the erratic tech billionaires." "I am the one who cleans up the mess," I said. "And you, my dear, are a mess." Mark let out a low moan. He slumped forward, his hands gripping his hair. "Oh my God," Mark muttered. "Oh my God, I left the cardinal for a shopaholic." He looked up at me, his eyes wet with tears of pure regret. It was not love. It was the realization of the magnitude of his loss. He had been sleeping next to a woman who could have bought him the world. A woman who possessed a mind sharper than any computer. A woman who commanded the respect of titans. And he had treated me like a servant. He had cheated on me with a woman whose only talent was spending money she did not earn. "Juliet," Mark choked out. I did not know. Why did you not tell me? Why did you hide it?" "Because I wanted a husband." "Mark," I said, looking down at him with pity. "Not a gold digger. I wanted someone who loved me for Juliet, not for my portfolio. I gave you 10 years to prove you were a good man. You proved you were a parasite." "I can change," Mark cried, crawling toward me. "I can learn. Teach me. I will be your student. I will be your assistant. Just do not throw me away." "It is too late for school," I said coldly. I turned my attention back to Thomas. He was still kneeling. His head bowed so low his forehead was touching the carpet. He was sobbing quietly. The sound of a man watching his legacy dissolve. "Please," Thomas wept. "My reputation, my family name, it is all I have. Do not liquidate us. Do not strip us bare. I will work for you. I will run the company as your subordinate. Just let me keep my dignity." "Dignity?" I asked. "You came in here threatening to throw me out of a window. You raised a daughter who treats people like dirt. You lost your dignity a long time ago." "Thomas, I am just taking the props away." I walked back to the chair and sat down. I checked my watch. "The market closes in 3 hours," I said. "By then, the news of the acquisition will be public. The stocks will shift. The transition team is already in the lobby." I looked at the 3 of them, the father, broken and kneeling, the daughter, battered and shocked, the ex-husband, full of regret and shame. "The game is over," I announced. "I have what I came for." I pressed a button on the intercom. "Security," I said. "Send in the cleaning crew." "Madam," the voice on the intercom asked. "I have 3 large bags of trash in the boardroom," I said, my eyes sweeping over the trio on the floor. "I want them removed immediately, and I want the air purifiers turned up to maximum. It stinks of failure here." Thomas let out a wail of despair. Brianna buried her face in her hands. Mark just stared at me, memorizing the face of the woman he had underestimated. The face that would haunt every nightmare he had for the rest of his miserable life. "You have 1 hour to vacate all Sterling properties," I told them. "If you are found on the premises after 60 minutes, you will be arrested for trespassing. And Mark," he looked up, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Do not forget your pen," I said, pointing to the cheap plastic pen on the floor. "You are going to need it to fill out your unemployment applications." The doors opened. The security team marched in. "Get them out," I ordered. "And do not be gentle." As the guards grabbed them by the arms and hauled them to their feet, I turned my chair around to face the window. I did not watch them leave. They were no longer worth my attention. I looked out at the skyline of New York, the city that was a chessboard, and I smiled. Checkmate. "Wait," I said. The single word cut through the air like a command from a deity. The security guards, who were in the process of dragging Thomas Sterling and his weeping daughter toward the exit, froze instantly. They turned to look at me, awaiting further instructions. Thomas looked up, a flicker of pathetic hope igniting in his watery eyes. He thought, perhaps, that I had found a shred of mercy in my heart. He thought that maybe, just maybe, the memory of his past glory had swayed me. He was wrong. I had not stopped them from offering mercy. I had stopped them because the execution was incomplete. Firing them was a corporate administrative action. It was a slap on the wrist. What I had planned next was an amputation. "Bring them back to the table," I ordered. "And Arthur, bring in the guests." "Guests," Mark whispered, wiping his nose with his sleeve. "What guests, Juliet? Please, just let us go. We will leave. We will disappear." "You are not going anywhere." "Mark," I said, my voice smooth and dangerous. "Not until we balance the books. You see, when I acquired the debt of Sterling Global at 8 o'clock this morning, I ordered a forensic audit of the last 5 years of operations. My team is very fast. They use artificial intelligence algorithms that can sniff out a discrepancy of a single cent in a ledger of billions. I signaled to Arthur. He opened the double doors again. This time, it was not lawyers who entered. It was men and women in windbreakers. Navy blue windbreakers with bright yellow lettering on the back. FBI. And behind them, men in suits with the grim, humorless expressions of the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division. The room seemed to drop 10 degrees in temperature. Thomas Sterling let out a sound that was not quite a scream, but a strangled gasp of pure terror. His legs gave out completely, and the guards had to hold him up by his armpits. Brianna stopped crying and started hyperventilating. "What is this?" Brianna wheezed. "Why are they here?" "They are here for the ghost projects." "Brianna," I said, standing up and walking over to the projection screen. I clicked the remote. The image changed from a spreadsheet to a map of New York City and New Jersey. Several locations were marked with red pins. "Arthur, would you care to explain the concept of a ghost project to the former board?" I asked, taking my seat again. Arthur stepped forward, adjusting his glasses. "Certainly, Madam Chairwoman. A ghost project is a development site where money is poured in for construction materials, labor, and consulting fees. But no actual building ever takes place. The site remains an empty lot, or a hole in the ground. The invoices, however, are real. They are paid to shell companies owned by the developers themselves." Arthur pointed to a red pin in the Bronx. "Project Beta." Arthur read from his file. "On paper, this is a 20-story luxury condominium complex. According to the Skyline ledgers, $30 million has been spent on steel and concrete for this site over the last 2 years. Arthur clicked a button. A photograph appeared on the screen. It showed a vacant lot filled with weeds, rusted chain-link fences, and a pile of garbage. There was no building. There was no steel. There was certainly no $30 million worth of concrete. "Fraud," I said, looking directly at Thomas. "Wire fraud, bank fraud, and tax evasion. You took loans from banks' loans that I now own, and you funneled that money into your offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. You laundered dirty money through fake construction contracts." "No," Thomas shouted, struggling against the guards. "That is a lie. That is a holding site delays. We had zoning delays." "We have the emails, Thomas," I said simply. "We have the emails between you and your accountant discussing how to hide the funds. We have the wire transfers. We have the witness testimony from your former CFO, who was very eager to cut a deal when my lawyers approached him an hour ago." I turned to the lead FBI agent, a tall woman with eyes like flint. "Agent Miller," I said, "the evidence is all yours. Vantablack Holdings cooperates fully with federal investigations. We are the victims here. After all, we bought a company believing it was solvent, only to find it was a criminal enterprise." Agent Miller nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Northcott. We will take it from here." She turned to Thomas and Brianna. "Thomas Sterling, Brianna Sterling," she announced, her voice ringing with the authority of the United States government. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The agents moved in. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut is a very specific, mechanical noise. Click, click. It signifies the end of freedom. It signifies the end of an era. "No, no, do not touch me," Brianna screamed, thrashing as an agent pulled her arms behind her back. I am Sterling. My father knows the mayor. You cannot arrest me, Daddy. Do something. But Daddy could do nothing. Thomas was sobbing openly now, tears streaming down his face as he was cuffed. The Titan of Wall Street, the man who had slapped his daughter for disrespecting me, was now nothing more than a criminal suspect. "Mark!" Brianna yelled, looking at her lover. "Mark, tell them we are innocent. Help me." Mark backed away, his hands raised in surrender. "I have nothing to do with this. I am just a contractor. I did not know about the offshore accounts, I swear." "Actually," I interrupted, looking at Mark with a cold, analytical gaze, "you are not under arrest. Mark, not yet." Mark let out a breath of relief, his shoulders sagging. "Oh, thank God. Thank God. Juliet, thank you. I knew you would not let them take me." "Do not thank me," I said. "You are not being arrested because you were too incompetent to be part of the inner circle. Thomas and Brianna did not trust you enough to let you in on the big steal. You were just a useful idiot they kept around for entertainment." Mark's face fell. Being called an idiot was almost worse than being arrested in his mind. "However," I continued, "while you may not be going to federal prison today, I have taken the liberty of contacting the National Association of Builders and the New York Licensing Board." I picked up a piece of paper from my desk and slid it across the mahogany table toward him. "This is a notice of blacklisting," I explained. "Based on the evidence of the kickbacks you took the $300,000 for the consulting fees, I have filed a formal complaint for ethics violations. Your contractor's license is suspended pending investigation, and I have personally notified every major development firm in the city that if they hire you, Vantablack will pull their financing." Mark stared at the paper. His hands were shaking so hard he could not pick it up. You took my job," he whispered. "Juliet, construction is all I know. How am I supposed to live?" "I suggest you learn a new trade," I said. "I hear they are hiring dishwasher operators in New Jersey. Minimum wage is $15 an hour. If you save carefully, you might be able to afford a studio apartment in a decade." "But the penthouse," Mark cried, grasping at straws. "We have the penthouse, Brianna and I. Even if she goes to jail, the deed is in our names. We have equity." The penthouse," I said, tapping my chin. "The one at 157, beautiful view, terrible mortgage terms." I looked at Arthur. "Did we execute the foreclosure?" "Yes, madam," Arthur replied. "The mortgage was held by City National Bank, which is a subsidiary of Vantablack, due to the missed payments and the revelation of fraudulent income on the application. The bank has called the loan immediately. Since Mr. Evans cannot pay the $12 million balance, the property has been seized. The locks were changed 10 minutes ago." Mark looked as if I had shot him in the chest. "Seized, but my clothes are there, my watch collection." "The contents of the apartment have been impounded as collateral against the debt," I said. "You have nothing, Mark. You have no job. You have no home. You have no money. And you have no wife." "Juliet," he wailed, falling to his knees again. "Please, I am begging you. I will do anything. I will be your servant. Just do not leave me on the street." "You left yourself on the street the moment you decided to betray me," I said. The FBI agents began to march Thomas and Brianna out. "I will kill you," Brianna shrieked over her shoulder. Her face twisted into a mask of pure ugliness. "I will kill you, Juliet. You will pay for this." "Enjoy prison, Brianna," I called out calmly. "I hear orange is the new black. It might suit your complexion better than that gold dress." Thomas did not scream. He just hung his head, a broken man, dragged away to answer for a lifetime of greed. Mark was left alone in the middle of the room, kneeling on the carpet, surrounded by the empty chairs of the board members who had fled the moment the police arrived. I stood up. I smoothed the front of my charcoal suit. I picked up my clutch. "Juliet," Mark whispered, looking up at me. He looked small. He looked pathetic. He looked like a stranger. I walked past him. I did not stop. I did not look down. "Juliet, wait!" he cried, scrambling to his feet to follow me. One of my security guards stepped in his path, a wall of muscle in a black suit. He shoved Mark back with one hand. Mark stumbled and fell hard. "Do not touch her," the guard growled. I walked to the elevator. The doors opened with a soft chime. I stepped inside and turned around. Mark was sitting on the floor of the boardroom, weeping into his hands. Behind him, the panoramic window showed the city of New York. A city he used to think he could conquer. A city that had just chewed him up and spit him out because he messed with the wrong woman. The doors closed, shutting him out of my sight forever. I rode the elevator down to the lobby in silence. My heart was not racing. My hands were not shaking. I felt a profound, cool sense of peace. It was the feeling of a balance sheet finally zeroing out. When I stepped out of the building, the paparazzi were already there. The news of the FBI raid had spread instantly. Cameras flashed, blinding white lights popping in the afternoon sun. Reporters shouted questions. "Ms. Northcott. Ms. Northcott, is it true Thomas Sterling has been arrested? Who is the new owner of Skyline? Do you have a comment on your husband's involvement?" I put on my sunglasses. I did not stop. I did not speak. I moved through the crowd like a shark moving through water. Alfred was waiting by the curb with the limousine. He held the door open. "To the airport, madam?" Alfred asked. "No, Alfred," I said, sliding into the cool leather interior. "Take me home. I have some calls to make." The door closed, shutting out the noise of the chaotic world. I watched through the tinted glass as the police cars flashed their lights, casting blue and red reflections on the glass facade of the Skyline building. I saw a figure being led out in handcuffs. Brianna, still struggling, her hair a mess. I reached for the bottle of sparkling water in the console. I poured a glass. My phone buzzed. It was a news alert. "Breaking news. Sterling Empire crumbles. FBI raids. Skyline Luxury Group. Mysterious private equity firm. Vantablack seizes control." The article speculated wildly about who was behind Vantablack. Some said it was a European conglomerate. Some said it was a tech billionaire. Nobody suspected the woman in the back seat of the limousine. The identity of the cardinal remained a ghost story, a whisper in the wind. That was how I liked it. Power is most effective when it is invisible. I scrolled down to my contacts list. I found the entry for husband. I pressed edit, then I scrolled to the bottom. Delete contact. I pressed it. The name vanished. There was no hesitation. There was no pang of regret. It was just data deletion. Mark Evans was no longer a person to me. He was a bad asset that I had liquidated. I looked out the window as the car turned onto Fifth Avenue. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. The city looked beautiful. It looked full of opportunity. I thought about the future. Skyline was just the beginning. The files I had seized from Thomas Sterling contained dirt on half the developers in the city. The corruption went deep. There were other debts to collect. There were other empires built on sand that needed to be toppled. I took a sip of water. It was crisp and cold. "Alfred," I said to the intercom. "Yes, madam." "Call my architect," I said. "I want to redesign the penthouse. I am thinking of getting rid of the beige. I want something bold, something sharp." "Very good, madam." I leaned back and closed my eyes. The revenge was complete. The traitors were punished. The board was cleared. Tomorrow, I will start a new game. But for tonight, I would sleep the sleep of the righteous. "The cardinal is awake," I whispered to myself, "and she is just getting started." 6 months is a long time in New York City. In 6 months, seasons change. Skylines are redrawn, and fortunes can evaporate like rain on hot asphalt. For the city, life moved on with its usual ruthless rhythm. The subways ran. The tourists gawked at the neon lights of Times Square, and the coffee shops churned out millions of lattes. But for Mark Evans, time had become a heavy, suffocating blanket. He was no longer wearing Italian suits. He was no longer shouting orders into a smartphone while pacing a corner office. Mark was standing shin-deep in wet concrete on a construction site in Queens. wearing a neon yellow vest that smelled of sweat and old tobacco. His hands, once manicured and soft, were now calloused and cracked, the nails permanently rimmed with gray dust. "Hey, Evans," the foreman shouted, spitting on the ground. "Stop daydreaming and shovel that mix. We have a schedule to keep. If you are not done by 5, you are not getting paid." "I am moving as fast as I can," Mark muttered, wiping grit from his forehead with the back of his glove. "What did you say?" the foreman barked. "I said I am moving," Mark yelled back, digging the shovel into the heavy sludge. His back screamed in protest. He was 45 years old, and his body was not built for this. Every muscle ached, every joint popped. He lived in a basement apartment in a neighborhood where the police sirens were the nightly lullaby. It was damp, it smelled of mold, and the radiator hissed and clanked all night, mocking him. He had no savings. The lawyers had taken everything to settle the civil suits. The blacklist Juliet had initiated was absolute. No reputable firm would hire him for management. He was lucky to get this job as a day laborer, paid in cash under the table, doing the grunt work he used to look down on. During his lunch break, Mark sat on a stack of cinder blocks, eating a sandwich that tasted like cardboard. A discarded magazine lay in the dirt near his boots. It was a copy of Forbes, 3 months old, wrinkled and water-damaged. He picked it up. His heart stopped. On the cover was a woman. Her face was photographed in profile, half in shadow, half in brilliant light. She looked regal, mysterious, and terrifyingly beautiful. The headline read in bold white letters, "The Cardinal Unveiled, the Woman Who Manipulates the Real Estate Market of New York." Mark traced the line of her jaw with a trembling finger. It was Juliet. But it was not his Juliet. It was not the woman who used to worry about the price of eggs. This was a titan. The article inside described her as the quiet architect of the new financial era, a woman who had consolidated distressed assets worth billions into a new empire called Phoenix Holdings. She looked happy. She looked powerful. She looked complete. Mark dropped the magazine into the mud. A tear cut a clean track through the dust on his cheek. He had held a diamond in his hand, and he had thrown it away to chase a piece of colored glass. Far away from the grime of Queens, inside the Federal Correctional Institution in Danbury, Brianna Sterling was learning a very different lesson about value. She sat on the edge of her bunk, staring at the gray cinder block wall. Her blonde hair, once her pride and joy, was dull and pulled back into a messy ponytail. There were no expensive shampoos here. There were no blowouts. There were no facials. Her uniform was a shapeless beige jumpsuit that scratched her skin. "Sterling inspection," a guard shouted, banging a baton against the bars. Brianna stood up quickly, keeping her head down. She had learned the hard way that arrogance was a currency that had no value in prison. The first week, she had tried to demand special treatment. She had screamed that her father was Thomas Sterling. The other inmates laughed. Then they had stolen her commissary snacks. Now, she was just inmate number 7429. Her father was in a different facility, a maximum security prison in upstate New York. The lawyers said Thomas was not doing well. The shock of the arrest, the humiliation of the public trial, and the total seizure of his assets had broken his spirit. He spent his days staring at the wall, muttering about interest rates and betrayal. The Sterling name, once synonymous with luxury, was now a punchline in business schools, a case study in corporate greed and failure. Juliet Northcott, however, did not spend much time thinking about the past. She sat in the back of her new car, a Rolls-Royce Phantom with an interior that smelled of fresh lavender and success. She was typing on her tablet, reviewing the quarterly projections for the Phoenix Fund, her new venture dedicated to providing capital for female entrepreneurs who had been rejected by traditional banks. "We are approaching the site, madam," Alfred said from the front seat. "Thank you, Alfred," Juliet said. "Pull up to the main entrance." The car glided to a stop in front of a gleaming skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan. It used to be the Skyline Tower. Now, the old sign has been torn down. In its place, massive silver letters spelled out a single word, Phoenix. It was the grand opening of the building's new headquarters. The sidewalk was crowded with reporters, investors, and well-wishers. Juliet stepped out of the car. She wore a white suit today, sharp and immaculate, symbolizing a clean slate. The cameras flashed, but she was used to them now. She waved briefly, her expression serene. As she walked toward the revolving doors, a commotion broke out near the security barricade. Juliet, Juliet. The voice was rough, desperate, and vaguely familiar. Juliet paused. She turned her head slightly. A man was trying to push through the line of security guards. He was wearing dirty work boots and a stained yellow vest over a flannel shirt. His face was gaunt, his eyes wild with a mixture of hope and madness. "Juliet, it is me, it is Mark," the man shouted, waving a dirty hand. "Please, just 1 minute, I need to talk to you." The security guards, massive men in black suits, blocked his path easily. One of them shoved him back toward the curb. "Back off, sir," the guard warned. "Stay behind the barrier." "No, you do not understand," Mark cried, tears streaming down his face. "That is my wife. That is my wife." The crowd murmured. People pointed phones at him, capturing the pathetic scene of a deranged construction worker claiming to be the husband of the richest woman in New York. Juliet looked at him. For a moment, time seemed to suspend. She looked at the man who had shared her bed for 10 years. She saw the lines of worry etched into his face. She saw the desperation in his posture. She remembered the nights he had come home late, smelling of Brianna's perfume. She remembered the recording of him calling her a dead body. She remembered the way he had begged on the floor of the boardroom. Mark saw her looking. He stopped struggling. He stood there, panting, his eyes locking with hers. He waited for something. Anger, pity, love, hate. He found none of it. Juliet's eyes were clear, calm, and utterly empty of recognition. It was not that she did not know who he was. It was that he no longer mattered. He was a stranger. He was a statistic. He was a ghost from a life she had shed like a snakeskin. She did not speak. She did not frown. She simply blinked, turned her head forward, and continued walking toward the door. "Juliet!" Mark screamed, his voice breaking. "Juliet, please look at me!" But she was already gone, disappearing into the golden light of the lobby, leaving him standing in the cold shadow of the building he once thought he would own. Inside, the lobby was cool and quiet. A man was waiting for her by the elevators. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. His name was David, a renowned architect who had designed the sustainable housing project her fund was sponsoring. He held a blueprint tube in one hand and 2 coffees in the other. "Rough crowd outside?" David asked, handing her a cup. "I heard shouting." "Just the city noise," Juliet said, taking the coffee. Her voice was light, unburdened. "Nothing important. Are the designs for the community center ready?" "They are," David said, falling into step beside her as they walked to the private elevator. "I think you are going to love the atrium. We designed it to let in maximum light, no dark corners." "Good," Juliet said, smiling at him. It was a genuine smile, one that reached her eyes. "I am done with dark corners. I want everything out in the open." David looked at her with blatant admiration. He did not know the full extent of her history. He only knew the brilliant, compassionate, an incredibly strong woman standing next to him, and that was enough. He respected her mind. He valued her opinion. He did not want her money. He wanted her vision. "You know," David said softly as the elevator doors closed, shutting out the world below. "You look extraordinary today. Juliet, that suit fits you. It looks like victory." "It feels like freedom," Juliet corrected him. The elevator whisked them up, past the 40th floor where Brianna used to preen, past the 50th floor where Thomas used to rage. They went all the way to the roof. Juliet stepped out onto the observation deck. The wind whipped at her hair, but she did not mind. She walked to the edge of the railing and looked out. New York City lay spread out before her like a map of diamonds. To the south, The Freedom Tower pierced the sky. To the west, the Hudson River glittered like a ribbon of silver. She took a deep breath. The air tasted crisp and clean. She thought about the journey, the pain of betrayal, the humiliation of being underestimated, the intricate, dangerous dance of the takeover, the satisfaction of seeing justice served. It was all over. The revenge was not the end. It was the clearing of the brush so that something new could grow. She looked down at the streets below. Somewhere down there, Mark was walking back to his basement. Somewhere, Brianna was sitting in a cell. They were trapped in the prisons of their own making, one of concrete, one of regret. But she was soaring. She placed her hands on the cold metal railing. She felt the hum of the building beneath her feet, a building she owned, a symbol of her resilience. Juliet Northcott smiled. It was the smile of a woman who had walked through fire and come out holding the torch. The camera pans out slowly, rising higher and higher, leaving Juliet as a white speck on top of the world, surrounded by the endless possibilities of the horizon. Voiceover. They laughed because my investment was small. I laughed because they did not know that the price of ignorance is always priceless. The screen fades to black. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If you enjoyed witnessing this journey of justice and resilience, please leave a comment down below and tell me where are you listening from right now. I would love to connect with you and hear your thoughts on Juliet's revenge. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel Scarlet Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that like button so this story can be heard by even more people. Your support means the world to me. See you in the next story.